started on podcast and being that things never seem to go exactly the way that I expect them to, I'm just going to waffle for a little bit and hope that the stream buffers in properly when I've started discussing things instead of 5 minutes after I start discussing things. So, and just sort of wax lyrical for a little bit, talk about getting back into watching some of the good old classic movies. Something I watched again today for the 50th time probably was The Shawshank Redemption. And yeah, Stephen King is really a mastermind who can write a short story that goes on to become an Oscar-winning classic movie. And who else could do that, really? But, well, okay, other people do that, but look, he's a great author. And I've just read another one of his books that follows a similar pattern in some ways, and I won't say a lot more about it because it will ruin things, but, you know, jail's an interesting one for the context that I want to give this discussion a little bit further in. And I was thinking to myself that in the entire history of people having jails, from the very first time they created a stone building with a locked door on it and put a person inside, I don't know if there's ever been a empty prison. That's the last prison to have had somebody in it. You get what I'm saying? I think there might have always been at least somebody in jail for the entirety of the history of having jails. It bothers me as somebody who's been there, but it's just because of how much of an antithesis to what the life experience is that jail really is. And it's kind of one of those shit goes like getting hit by a car or struck down by an incurable disease. It's just something that happens that fucks up the natural flow of your entire life. And it's this big immutable thing that you get put inside of. And, you know, this movies about people pulling the impossible to get out of those things and then disappearing and obviously becoming somebody completely different. That on its own is all just crazy that that's things that are available in the life experience, you know. And you wonder about having this no choice to be born, if that's the truth, and then, you know, experiencing it as something that you're not actively playing much of a deciding role in. And when you're fairly young, you learn about a thing called jail, and when you're a little bit older, you learn a little bit more about what it is. And by the point that you're an adult, you should have a pretty good understanding of what jail is. And the more that you experience jail, the more that you understand it. And when you really see what it is, it's really disturbing that it's always been there in the life experience, you know, like you'll be born into a world with criminals and crime and punishment in severe ways that are hard to deal with. But look, this is all just me driving around this idea that it's inverse to something that was designed for the world to be, you know. And here's where it gets interesting for me inside of the author's devices that are used in things like I was talking about before you people joined. The Shawshank Redemption's a great one about being in jail. And this idea that there is a creator, right? There's like a God, you know. It's something that people use all different kinds of psychologies and references of, you know, sciences maybe, or spirituality, even like accounts like, you know, things like the Bible go on to form religions. But this idea is more profound in places like a jail where people are driven in and in to their own conceptualization and their own method of escaping the places by being unconscious and dreaming. And I had an experience when I was in jail where I went and met a being that seemed to me to be the Almighty, you know. Describe him as like a super benevolent giant. It'd just be like the start of a book that I could write on describing what that experience in a dream was like. But the most profound thing I've ever experienced was only in December last year, where I looked up around the North Star after staring at the Pleiades, and I saw the tunnel of light that people describe in near-death experiences. Only, you know, I'm not in any way near death at the time, and I'm fully cognizant. There's no substances I'm on. And this appeared behind where the stars resolve for your eye. So to me, seeing something that is observably clouds, you know, in a stable structure, an intelligent design, something that's designed to evoke beauty, that goes up like a seashell, I guess, you know, like a tunnel that tapers slightly. And at the top, there's a golden cloud spilling out of, you know, the circular top of it. And it looks just like what you see in the CGI Galaxy core. You know, that's what's photographed from up there. But all of those implications being that this thing resolves in your vision to over 0.5 meter, it means it's the biggest thing in the sky. It's the size that people give you when they say things like, here's what Jupiter would look like if it's near the moon. You know, it's the kind of thing that we're talking, or maybe the red spot in the sky, you know. We're talking a large section of the sky lighting up. And it showed me that that's got to be the Van Allen belt underneath it, which is generating a haze, like in a desert, so it limits your sight distance, yeah, and it's working like a tint in a car. So when I'm staring at the Pleiades, what's occurring is absorbing more and more light from the most densely grouped set of stars in the sky. So over time, that's filled my eyes enough to bounce the light back and forth so that I see through the tint. You know, and this is what would happen if you put a mag light in front of a tinted limousine. You can see into the limousine just fine. All you need to see through tinting is a sufficiently strong light source. So, I mean, my brain compiles the information this way because of what would happen when you look at the sun, and we're dealing in the same types of objects, the stars and the sun, right? These are sources of light from the sky. The sun will give you an after image burn because it'll overload all of your sensory receptors at once with too much energy, you know. So this is the same process at a tolerable set when you're looking at the night sky, only most of the stars are spread out and dispersed, so you're getting, you know, several points from several directions, and you can't really focus on one point to open up the cones all the way. But the Pleiades will let you do this if you have like a loose focus and you sort of stare around it the way that you'd be described in solving like a magic eye picture, if you like. But yeah, this is me using what happened directly before I saw the tunnel of light to what must be heaven and what must have been designed by the being that put the knowledge of beauty inside of you, because there's ways that it's been drawn in very old depictions of the tunnel of light with like angels coming down from clouds. It's black and white. Might have been a carving, maybe a picture, but it's quite famous. Maybe a charcoal drawing. And there's other ways that you've seen this tunnel of light drawn. So I think in places like ancient battlefields, people would have seen this as their guts were spilling out and given a sworn last words testimony to say a monk that was on the battlefield to take such vows back to loved ones or whatever. And, you know, in some way, these accounts came to great artists of the time and they've recorded this stuff. But I think there's something quite profound about me experiencing this with my waking senses and relating it to people in a way that resolves all of this stuff that's been going on with people decrying the heliocentric model for creation, being that if we're in this Big Bang to now evolution soup, then how does it resolve things like, you know, the life experience and, you know, a million other things. But you got to engineer slowly backwards from where the understanding started, that we must be evolving and it must be a Big Bang to now style like timeline. So we can look at where the church was no longer at the center of things. And me giving this message is not an endorsement of the church. It's just an acknowledgement that at different points the church has been in contact with this direct sensory knowledge. And look, a lot of people have experiences through history and even probably walking around today that I don't decry about, having a divine encounter, like something like I described in a dream, even in the waking life, They believe they met an angel or even a demon, and I wouldn't decry them having had that experience. But this is something that I believe happened to me so that I can provide people the way for them to recreate this. And this will delete this giant deceptive network that's built up on deleting the concept that came to humanity through these encounters with divine energy or divine beings or the beings that are serving the intelligent designer. And there's literally no way for what I saw to have been accidental and for what I saw to have been some kind of hallucination. It's like I didn't have the context of there being a distance gradient between the stars and something that's more visually perceivable than tiny dots of light, something that's the size of a very large hollow planet right there behind the stars. Like, I don't know how my brain could have the context even with the most intense thing that they might call a LSD flashback, if those things are kind of real, and I kind of doubt it. I think I've had enough sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations to know what's mostly going on there is drawing from some context in the brain. And yeah, I think a lot of times when you're on certain drugs or having certain experiences, you are in touch with things that are down here and normally not observable. And again, I think a lot of that is coming from your brain using context that it knows to turn things that it doesn't have a personal context for you into something for you to understand and comprehend. And you might find that's true in the sense of being an active part of whatever experience you're having, that certain people would talk about, not so much as a passive description of your sensory environment changing, but you adapting to those changes and taking on a different role to the role that you were playing before by just walking around, breathing, and interacting normally. And like I could explain it a lot more depth what that all meant, but to me it's the idea that you access what you're able to turn into understanding when you're using drugs or deep meditative practices to achieve any kind of beyond the normal senses experience or understanding. But what I'm talking about is as simple as looking in one direction and then looking in another direction. It's not something that I think is exclusive to anything about me being unique, And I think everybody is unique and everybody has a unique purpose, but my purpose has been synthesized out of a lot of rejecting of a lot of complete idea sets and filtering them down into incomplete idea sets that link to other idea sets. And I just see a trail of intuitions going around reality, even where people are asserting that they're concretions of absolutes, laws, if you will. I think everything's just a loosely governed agreement. And if the governance of that agreement can be shaken by literally consciousness, then it will change observably. There's a lot of weird things connected to why all of that is, but the idea that if people aren't able to recreate what I saw, then me talking about it is still going to be at the center of my reality. And like right now, my reality is falling down around my ears, like really badly, actually. I've had to engage several government services to prevent from being evicted, having not been able to meet my basic needs other than paying rent, which doesn't put food in me. I actually got sick for the first time since I went vegan over nearly 20 years ago, which scares me to the point that I've had to take extreme measures of redress in literally doing things I don't like doing, reaching out and asking for help, and things that I'm not very good at, which are communicating to systems of authority around the place that you need sometimes. Anyway, this is getting a little bit personally expositional, but it's essential for people, as far as I understand, to see that this isn't something that I'm doing for money or for notoriety or for the fact that, you know, I've got an album for purchase or 3 albums for purchase and I've never like toured or played it or paid money to promote it. It's just there and something I did to make a record of myself. And if people like it, then yip-de-dee, it's not really my business. But, you know, people send me emails and all the rest of that. It's just I'm trying to say that, like, I could platform myself in a bunch of different ways. I could build like a YouTube channel following based on niches of understandings like a lot of people out there are doing, even if they were trivialities like TV trivia from the 90s or whatever, you know. I've got all of that knowledge inside of myself to exploit in terms of public awareness, but I've never really seen the point. There's a refinement to myself that I try to just make keynote addresses about things that I feel can affect other people's perspective, whether or not it's something that they go and take on themselves. It's another way that I'm trying to draw a distinction between myself and people that are out there telling people what they think the answers are for them, because I'm 39, by the way, if you're still there. So yeah, everyone from a religious leader to the Tate brothers out there telling people what the answers are and telling them how to win. And everyone who's on some kind of spiritual path is pretty convicted in why they're on that spiritual path and where they think it leads. Well, I'm somebody who's gone between different religions and even like experimented on my own with the idea of religion, and I've always had what I feel is like a healthy respect for God in whatever form God truly exists. That's what I believe that he does. And the idea that if you're not doing life a certain way, then you're outside the boundaries of what's called like the true core faith. I mean, I think my experiences prove that that's all a lie. And that everything that people have referenced from the point that we started to deviate away from this original understanding of the order of creation as heaven and earth, and like relevancy is here, you know. We got the stars, which is like this, you know, dancing field of spirit, as the ancient peoples used to say, you know, the campfires in the sky or whatever, you know, where the ancestors dwell. Different things like that. I think that's far more closer to the mark, but in terms of the modern understanding, we'd rephrase that as these are the stars as we understand them, but they're a lot smaller than we would have assumed based on what we've been promulgating for a long time through a concept called astrophysics. But the Van Allen belt being this, you know, belt that all the stars reside in, and it encircles above the earth, and above that you have heaven. That's your entire cosmic structure, and like there's a lot that can play out within that space between heaven and earth. But if you want to squeeze an infinite universe with other civilizations in there, I just think you're going to have a hard time fucking doing it. I mean, let's say you can have something that's like there of its own accord, the same way that the earth and the moon and the sun are just there of their own accord, you know, according to whatever force of real space existence that they're exploiting. There's a lot of things go out the window. This concept of gravity and heliocentrism, have to rework all of this to fit in what I saw with my raw senses, you know. But the rest of what they're describing can be reformed and put into small little niches. But say you have something small floating up there, I don't think you could have more than a couple of them, you know. But how far we can see comes into question based on how far away the tunnel is compared to how far away the North Star is, because that's the first understanding that comes as a natural consequence of having seen what I saw, which is that the stars are where they appear to be. You know, if you looked at a mountain in the distance, you'd say, well, that mountain appears to be 120 kilometers away, maybe. That's a long, long sight line, but for a tall mountain, yeah, it's probably pretty good before the haze blocks it off. Looking up, I don't know, I'm going to say something like 60 kilometers. And it's probably ballpark around that for ground to the North Star. And that's something that I know because I've seen something directly behind it. It's not like you'd imagine something in deep space and somehow you've got deep space vision and you can see something like in a holographic projection in your brain. It's all the way out there, but it's big, so you can see how much of the distance it's filling. It's all really, really fucking close for your senses to see. Here's where I can see the star, and on top of that is this giant tunnel. And it's all clouds like the fucking sky, you know, like it's the night sky continuing up. And yeah, that blue sky, there's really no limit to it. When we stare up, we just see blue sky, you know. And maybe it's the tint effect that we're seeing the edge of the blue being like a solid bar of tint, but maybe the sun colors that shit all the way up to heaven and like the top of the tunnel, I guess, you know. I mean, there's some kind of tint that blocks us seeing that in the daytime as much as in the nighttime, and it's all hidden in understanding of frequency. And this is why it's really interesting how the Pleiades act when you have them sort of balloon up in your vision and blur a little bit, and you should see a sine wave running through it. And to me, that's what this is frequency storing itself in harmonic balance points between the body and the space outside. And I mean, understanding of that concept through relating to nature is something that I've experimented with in terms of manifesting lightning, drawing it and sending it, which is cataloged a lot of the way through my YouTube channel. But this is something that becomes interesting to talk about in a lot of different areas, and I didn't really even talk about what I was thinking about talking about when I started it, because I just let it happen organically. And I'll end up covering a lot of ground that I've covered in previous lives that I've written, that I've broadcast. But the entire history of fiction that's writing these tales of the universe, I think they're interesting when we're dealing in a concept of worlds that aren't in this, what we think of as the universe. And I think that world concept can exist. I think worlds that exist the same way that ours do in the space that this is in, I think that's still objectively possible, but it's all just a lot smaller and modeled quite differently to what we're being told to believe by a system that's run on atheism. And that underpins everything. So I'll keep trying to communicate this until I die.